Alright, so look. I know neither of us wants to do this right now, but there comes a time in every person's life when certain things start to happen. You know, here's the thing, if we don't talk about this, if we don't have this talk, well, who knows where you're going to learn the right information? Are you listening? No? I mean, listen, so please. If this talk keeps you from, you know, misusing one document on an essay, then it'll all be worth it. What? What did you think we were talking about? I mean, we're a fourth of the way through the school year. It's the second 9 weeks. And it's time to talk about essays in AP World History. I mean, look, we've built a foundation. We spent the first 9 weeks talking about how to think historically. We've made claims, we've identified claims, we've looked for evidence, we've read some primary sources even. And so we've got everything we need now, and it's time. And look, I know neither of us really wants to deal with essays, right? But the sooner we start, the more practice you're going to get, the better you're going to be. Because, you know, creating historical arguments, writing AP World History essays is a skill. And any skill, the more you practice, the better you're going to be, right? So we're going to go ahead and start now. And we're gonna learn how to do this. And we're going to get over all the awkward. And, you know, we're gonna make it work. We're gonna be all right. And so to start, I think we need to start with an analogy. So my analogy is that the DBQ essay is like a hammer, or it's like a set of hammers. So we'll start with the second one. The DBQ essay is like a set of hammers. Each of them does a slightly different job, but at the end of the day, you're still hitting stuff with them. So you're going to get 7 documents on the DBQ, and each of those documents does something a little bit different. Some of them wind up looking a lot alike, right? And they kind of go together because they serve the same purpose. Some of them are going to look kind of similar, kind of same, you know, shape and size, but like this guy hits a lot softer than this guy does. And so sometimes you've got to know how to differentiate between those things, even though they kind of look the same. And then of course, you know, this guy, he's much more closely related to this guy, right? Even if at first glance, they don't appear to be that way. So part of your task with the DBQ is to sort through the documents and work that out, right? What do each of these documents do? How do I make it work, right? And then the overall essay is like a hammer. Oh, sorry. Forgot my 7th document down here. Sometimes you get one of these guys, which definitely doesn't look like any of these things, but at the end of the day, it's still going to break stuff. It's a rotary hammer, by the way. So, how is the overall DBQ like a hammer? Okay, hammer comes, there's two parts, right? The first part is the handle, and the second part is the head up here, right? So what is the handle? The handle is your argument, okay? So this is the thing that you're gonna hold on to at all times during the essay, okay? It's your historical claim, your thesis, your overall argument, okay? Or it can be individual lines of reasoning. You know, you may have 2 or 3 of these, but you still have to at all times have a good firm grip, because if you don't hang on to the handle and you take a swing, well, bad things, right? So, okay, so the handle is your argument. The head then is going to be evidence, okay? And so ultimately, every time you are taking a swing with the hammer, you're trying to make this evidence hit something, right? The reader, maybe, I don't know, the person who's scoring your essay. But again, you very rarely, if ever with a hammer, just take one swing, right? So in your essay, you're going to be repeatedly using your argument to throw more and more evidence at the reader to convince them that your argument is valid, okay? So, you know, when you think of it in that way, I think the essay makes a lot of sense for what you're trying to do, okay? You're gonna have to go through the same process over and over, and it always, these two things have to be held together. If they don't hold together, your essay is gonna suffer for it. So, that's the analogy. What does it look like in real terms? Let's go to the board and we'll break down the specific parts of the DBQ and what's going to be scored and what you're going to need to do on the day of. Okay, so most DBQ essays are going to be structured exactly the same way. All right, it's kind of mechanical. It's not the most artistic piece of writing you're ever going to do in your life, but structure gives you something to fall back on to allow you to focus on the actual analysis and stuff that you're doing, okay? So generally speaking, what we recommend for essays is that you start with this thing called contextualization. Contextualization is where you provide additional historical events, developments, or processes from either a past time period, elsewhere during the current time period of the prompt, or potentially things that continue after the time period of the prompt, okay? But you provide those to fill in a bigger picture of the prompt, and so whatever additional relevant historical information you give has to be relevant. It has to link into your thesis, right? So we'll talk more about contextualization, but generally there are two things with contextualization: specific events or processes, and then the link to your thesis, okay? And again, with all of these things, we'll talk more about these, or your teacher will tell you more about each of these individual parts, the purpose of the video, just to give you a rough overview, okay? So contextualization is how we recommend you start, because it's a little bit like an introduction. And we know that you need to introduce yourself sometimes. There's a purpose for doing that. And so in an essay, it's good form. It doesn't have to be here, but sometimes it's good to just go ahead and get it out of the way, get that point, and move on. All right, so number one, contextualization. The second thing then is your thesis. Your thesis has to do two things. It has to make a relevant historical argument based on the prompt, and it has to provide reasoning to support that argument. Okay, so again, two pieces that need to go in there. The first is really just answering the prompt. Okay, if it asks you to evaluate the extent to which something happened, then your claim is going to be how much did that thing happen, right? To what extent? That's just kind of answering the question. And then the lines of reasoning are there to support that. So if I'm saying that this thing really, really, really impacted someone, I'm going to say because here's 1, 2, or maybe even 3 ways that it did. Okay, so that's your thesis. You may not write it at the beginning of your essay. You may skip and leave yourself some space to come back and write it after you've written your essay. But generally, again, we want this to happen up front. The College Board will let you put it at the beginning of your essay or the end of your essay. You should definitely put it in the beginning of your essay, right? The end is optional. We'll talk about that more later. All right, so once you've established your thesis, you've given it some big picture set dressing or scenery by contextualizing it, then we're going to get into the main part of your DBQ, which is where you're going to use these guys to make your argument work, okay? And so each one of these then is going to be both parts of the hammer. You're going to give some evidence, and then you're going to explain how it links back to your thesis. So every single time, this is going to point back to here. This is going to point back to here. This is going to point back to here. Okay, again, it's the handle. You got to hold on to it, right? It's not enough just to say, well, document 1 says this, right? You've got to say, document 1 demonstrates blah, 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 which proves that something happened, whatever our prompt is, by showing this, right? You want to make it really clear, okay? If you don't make it clear, you may struggle to get all of the evidence points because evidence is broken down on the DBQ into 3 points. The first is an easy point, and it is simply using 3 pieces of evidence from the documents that relate to the prompt. All right, you may not use them to support an argument, but you use the parts of the document that relate to the prompt. The second point then is to use 6 of the 7 documents to support an argument. It means doing this thing, right? And so that the handle, that extra time you take to link it to and to hang on to your argument is what is going to help you earn that second point. Now it's 6 documents, 7 will be provided, so that always leaves you an out on one of the documents, but we're always going to suggest that you go ahead and try to use all 7 documents in your essay somewhere. Okay. Now, one thing that you may do as you're working with these documents is you may group documents together because they support a similar line of reasoning. So occasionally what you might have is a couple of documents or maybe even 3 documents that you group together, and this then might become a body paragraph, right? Because they support each other. However, I've read several sample essays that are 6s or 7s that are really perfect essays where they just use each piece of evidence kind of linearly or sequentially, but they tie it to an argument back to their thesis, and it works. Okay, ideally we're going to group these together so that we have a couple, maybe 3 body paragraphs, 1 per line of reasoning in your thesis, and so that it all kind of goes together and makes sense, right? Because it's easier to tie this thing together if this handle, if your line of reasoning is the same for multiple swings of the hammer. Okay. All right, and you're just going to do that until you run out of evidence. Do I write a conclusion? Sure, if you have time, right? Obviously, time is going to be a factor on this thing. So depending on what you have left, you can always write a conclusion. But the only thing your conclusion can really accomplish is to earn you the thesis point if you didn't earn it up here. Would I just repeat exactly what I say in my thesis, in my conclusion? No, because it's a waste of words, right? Either you earned it or you didn't. And if you didn't, writing the same thing again isn't going to earn you the point. So what I would encourage most kids to do, if you have the time, is to restate your thesis somehow. If you wrote your thesis at the beginning, by the time you get down to here, chances are you understand things a little bit better, and you might find better words to use in rewriting your thesis. Okay. Now, on the other hand, you may write all this way and didn't, frame a thesis back in the beginning, at which point you'd want to go back up, and then hopefully you have a good grasp of what you're trying to argue, and you can make that work. All right. So we'll go into more details on the rubric and things like that in either other videos or hopefully in your class time. But this is kind of an overview. Again, you're going to set it up with some background. You're going to tell us what your argument is, and then you're just going to over and over until you're done. So I hope that helps you understand what the document-based question essay is all about. It's just a quick overview. You can find more resources both here and hopefully with your teachers or out there on the web. Thanks for watching.